Okay, so boys, we're just doing some more examples on this work. So looking at the first triangle here, we've been asked firstly to find tan theta. So when you're looking at tan, it's opposite over adjacent. So let's just have a look at where the theta is here. We know that this is our hypotenuse, that's always going to be the hypotenuse. But for theta, this is your opposite side, and this is your other side, so that's your adjacent. So opposite over adjacent will be 24 over 7. Okay, the next one, we're still looking at theta, so I'm going to leave everything as it is. So we've got cos theta, that's A over H. So cos theta A over H is 7 over 25. Now the next one, we're jumping to alpha. So I'm keeping my hypotenuse, and I'm going to relabel these. So for alpha, this is now the opposite side. Whoops, opposite it, and this is the adjacent. So cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. Our adjacent side is 24 over our hypotenuse 25. We can keep everything there because we're still looking at alpha. This time we're doing tan, so it's opposite over adjacent. Opposite over adjacent is 7 over 24. Okay, now, coming over to number 5, we're looking at a new triangle here. This time they want you to write a correct trigonometric ratio involving x or y. So all they've given you is 60 over 11. Now, 60 and 11 are in these two positions. So 60 could be an opposite side for angle y. And if that's the case, this would be the adjacent side. So in that case, 60 over 11, opposite over adjacent. It means we're looking at tan, because that's opposite over adjacent. And the angle we were looking at was y, so it's tan y that they're after. All right, now the next one's a little bit different because there's two possible answers. We'll just get rid of this. Right, now we're doing 11 over 61. Well, 61 is your hypotenuse, right? That's opposite your right angle. But the 11, it could be the opposite side for angle x, or it might be the adjacent side for angle y. So it might be the adjacent side looking at angle y. So if we look at this as being 11 being the opposite side over the hypotenuse, then it would be sine. And that opposite side was opposite angle x, so it would be sine x. Or, if we look at that 11 on the top as being adjacent over hypotenuse, it's adjacent to side y. So A over H would be cos, and it's adjacent to angle y this time. So it could be sine x, or it could be cos y, and they're both correct answers. Now, looking at that, that might help us on the next question. So let's have a look at it. It says, it's multiple choice, which statement is true? Now, I've already marked in red pen the hypotenuse. So now we're going to think about this. So we've got sine u. So if we looked at sine u, right, sine would be opposite over hypotenuse. Right, so that would be opposite over hypotenuse for sine u. Now, if we did cos w, cos would be adjacent over hypotenuse for angle for w. Adjacent over hypotenuse, this is the adjacent side, and that's the hypotenuse. So that is actually the true statement, that one right there. Because when you do the sine of u, the opposite side is this one. When you do cos W, the adjacent side is that same side. So you end up with them both giving this side over this side. So that's the statement that's true. There's no need for us to check anything else. But we might have a look at it anyway, just to see why they wouldn't be right. Okay, so this one here is tan. That's opposite over adjacent. Okay, so tan U, opposite over adjacent. Sine W, well, it's not even looking at the same things at all because this one is involving a hypotenuse, right? So this one, sine is involving a hypotenuse, and that's not. So that one's not going to work at all. All right, this one here has a hypotenuse involved, and that doesn't. So that's not going to work. And this one down here, tan of U and tan of W, well, if I just redraw what we've got so you can have a look at it. Okay, tan U would be opposite over adjacent. Tan W would be opposite over adjacent. They're the wrong way around. Okay, so one might be 3 over 4, the other one might be 4 over 3. So that's not going to work either. So the correct answer is A. So it's a little bit tricky on that one, but as you get to know trig better, you'll realise that this is something we actually learn later on, that the sine of one of those angles equals the cos of the other angle. And you would have noticed with me switching things around, some of you might have already picked up, oh, I can see that if it's opposite one side, one angle, it's adjacent to the other angle. Okay, but if you haven't realised that yet, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of time for this all to sink in. Okay, the last example is number 7. So this one says sketch a right angle triangle for tan A equals 5 over 12. So I've drawn up a right angle triangle. Now we're going to mark everything in that they've got here. So the thing sitting in this spot is always an angle. That has to be an angle. So angle A is not going to go here. It's going to be one of these two. You can pick whichever one, it doesn't matter. You can write it there, or if you like, you can write it inside. I don't care, but angle A is there. Now, tan is opposite over adjacent. So that means the opposite side has to be 5 to that angle, and the adjacent side has to be 12. So that's everything marked in on the triangle that we can tell them so far. Now the next part says, use Pythagoras' theorem, I've just written it down, to find the unknown side. So we're going to sub these things in to find this missing side. I'm going to call it H because it is actually our hypotenuse. So we'll just call it H and keep that way. So we've got H squared. Sub in these other two sides. And if you use your calculator, you get 169 there. Square root that. And we find that H equals 13 once you solve this equation here. So the hypotenuse is going to be 13, so we can write that in on our triangle now. We know that's 13. And now we're going to answer the rest of it. So it says, then find sine A and cos A. Right, so after we find that, we're going to do sine A, which is opposite over hypotenuse. So let's look at angle A. Opposite over hypotenuse is 5 over 13. And the other one we had to find was cos A. Cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. So look at angle A. Adjacent over hypotenuse is 12 over 13. And that's the last of the examples we're doing for this work. Your homework will be on Compass. So have a look at the homework and do some practice with it before we get into the harder work next lesson.